Kailabreece.
Mr. Francis Bacon once wrote that a healthy body is a guest chamber for the soul, and a sick one is a prison. The truth, as evident as it is, has not been communicated well enough to the masses. Healthcare in general around the world is unimpressive. Lack of experienced medical practitioners, lack of qualified medical facilities, and lack of monetary resources have led to poor and mediocre healthcare systems globally. Yet an important goal in most nation-states is to extend the life expectancy of its citizens. So, many nations have begun implementing universal healthcare programs to assure that those goals are met. These programs vary in their structure and funding mechanisms, but typically, most costs are met through a single-payer system or a national health insurance. The United States is the only wealthy, industrialized nation that does not have a universal healthcare system. The government directly covers about a quarter of the population through healthcare programs for the elderly, disabled, military veterans, children, and some of the poor. And the current estimates put the U.S. healthcare spending at more than 15% of our GDP, which is a greater portion than in any other United Nations member state except the Marshall Islands. Now, whether a government-mandated system of universal health care should be implemented in the U.S. remains a hotly debated political topic, with Americans divided in their views of the U.S. health system and what should be done to improve it. Those in favor of government-guaranteed universal health care argue that the large number of uninsured Americans creates direct and hidden costs shared by all, and that by extending coverage to all, we would actually lower the costs and improve quality. Their second argument, and maybe one of a higher calling, is altruistic in its intent, basically advocating that everyone has the human right to health care, regardless of financial status, employment, or whatever. Opponents of health care, governmentally provided, argue that people should be free to opt out of health insurance, and claim that the bureaucracy will further disable and provide ultimately poorer coverage to all. Many also note that healthcare is not a human right, thus it is not the responsibility of the government to provide it. Opponents also state that the widely quoted healthcare system rankings by the World Health Organization, in which the U.S. systems are usually ranked very low, uses biased criteria, giving a false sense of the U.S.'s ranking. My question to my fellow intellectuals is this: what do you think about universal health care? Is health care a basic human right? Does ensuring the health of all citizens benefit a nation economically? Can we afford such an operation? And should the government be given exclusive or majority rights to such an endeavor? Now, this should be an easy topic. Who would say no to people having health care? But amazingly, there's a lot of pushback. I think the majority of the opposition are concerned with how it will be paid for and the efficiency of government-run programs. And understandably, the government doesn't exactly have a favorable reputation. Still, libertarians and conservatives should favor universal health care because in countries with universal health care, the government actually spends less tax money per person than the U.S. does. For example, in France, the government spends something like $600 less per person on health care than in the U.S. This would allow the U.S. to adopt universal health care while simultaneously cutting government spending and maybe even cutting taxes. That sounds like efficiency to me. And as far as how do we pay for it, well, I'll say it again. end the war on drugs. Legalize marijuana and tax it. Lump the cigarette tax, the alcohol tax, and the marijuana tax into one giant pot to use for health education and healthcare costs. Now, I know very little about the details and the technicals behind and within healthcare, but what I do know is that if human rights claim to be about suffrage, education, equality in general, why would healthcare not be considered in that category? I'm not sure who said this originally, but it's been said about 1,000,000 different ways, and that's, you can judge a society by the way in which they treat the disenfranchised. Healthcare for all is not just a budget line item. It's an investment in our humanity. This is Kailabreece.